Hey everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to Cinefessions, where we talk all things media. Today I am looking at the latest 4K box set from Scream Factory with the release of the Ring collection. This was one that was slated to come out back in October of last year, but they ended up delaying it in order to get a different transfer for the Ring, one that is approved by Gore Verbinski. How does it hold up? How does it look? Let's talk about that. So we'll go over the movies, the transfers, the audio, a little bit I'll touch on, and more. So let's not waste any time at all. Let's dive right into my 4K review of the Ring collection. Before we get into the new set from Scream Factory, let's talk about a few of the past releases that I happen to still have in my collection. So I'll start with the original Ring, and this is one that just a couple years ago got the 20th anniversary limited edition steelbook. And this thing looks really cool. You can see mine is still sealed. I never ended up getting around to this. I actually owned I think it was like the Best Buy exclusive Blu-ray. I owned that for the longest time, and I think that ended up going out of print, and so this one got a little trickier to find on Blu-ray for a bit, but then of course it did come out on this steelbook release, so it did go back into print. That said, this is now how I own this, but I will probably end up getting rid of this one from my collection, which is why I'm not opening it at this point. Obviously, if it's sealed, it's worth a little bit more than if it's open, and other than it being a cool steelbook, I don't really have a need for it in my collection now, but that one is currently here, and that'll stay for the time being. And then we'll move over to the Ring 2, which is interesting because this one never got a high-def release here in the States. Now, you can find you can import, I believe, a Blu-ray copy of this, but in terms of domestic releases in the States, it just never saw Blu-ray, so I do own this one on DVD. I actually had this one on a 2-pack with the original film for the longest time, but then I grabbed this one from, maybe it was in like one of my mystery unboxings or something, and so I decided just to keep the standalone version. So this one will also be leaving the collection because of the new set here, but that is the Ring 2, and then of course, the most recent film, Rings. I picked this one up just maybe a year ago or so. I found this at Disc Replay, so I ended up grabbing it because I'd never seen it before. And frankly, I didn't watch this Blu-ray either. I didn't watch it until I watched it for this review on 4K. But yes, this also is available on Blu-ray. So if you don't want this set, you can easily find that one. But with that said, let's jump over now to an unboxing of everything that's included with the Ring collection. So taking a look at this release itself. Now, I know not everyone loves this cover art, but I think it looks really nice. I had no issue with it ever since I first saw it. And this is a nice hard case. It just feels like it's higher quality, which I really like. So that's a decent release. And then on the inside, we have 3 4K cases. And so I'll just show these off really fast so you guys can see what is included. There is the artwork on the front and the back. And then on the inside, we do get artwork on all 8 discs. So this is an 8-disc set. You get a Blu-ray and a 4K disc for each of the movies. Why that's super important is for this one here, because the unrated cut is the only is only available rather on the Blu-ray, whereas the theatrical is on both the Blu-ray and the 4K version of the film. So I know that's going to irk some people. I know some people prefer the unrated cut of the Ring 2, but it is what it is. You know, you just got to deal with it at this point, basically, if you are interested in getting these movies on 4K. So yeah, those are the disc art and the releases themselves. Really, the standout to me though is this nice case that houses them all. I just think that looks really, really nice. So I think that's a pretty decent looking set from Scream Factory. There we go. All right, so let's get into the movies themselves. So The Ring from 2002, directed by Gore Verbinski. This really was a landmark film for me. I saw this multiple times in theaters. I say this every time I talk about this movie, but I skipped school one time in my life, and on that day, I went to go watch The Ring with my buddy. It was like the 3rd or 4th time I'd seen it at that point, but I utterly adored this film the first time I saw it, and frankly, every time since. This is just such a well-done film. This really kicked off the J-horror craze of the mid-2000s, which, of course, I always enjoy. The Grudge came out of this, and then, Dark Water, The Eye, so many different movies. Pulse is another one. And I enjoy all those to a certain degree. This is an instance, though, where I actually prefer The Ring to the original, which is Ringu. However, when you look at something like Ju-on The Grudge, that is a significantly better movie than The Grudge, in my opinion, at least the American version. But this is one where I really like this remake better. Now, mind you, I've seen the original only once, and I've seen this one probably 6 or 7 times now, but I love this one, and so that's why I continue to come back to it. So we are following, I'm sure you know what it's about, but we are following this woman who stumbles across this situation where kids were dying because supposedly because they watched this videotape. They watched this tape that was supposed to be haunted, and then they'd get a phone call right after watching it, and then 7 days later, they end up dead. So she ends up into this loop and is trying to make her way out of it. And Naomi Watts plays our lead character, Rachel, in this. And I think she does such a great job in this one and, of course, in the sequel as well. This is just really, when I think of Naomi Watts, this is what I think of, is her role in this. Because it's really, the first time I recognized her as an actress was with this film, because I was enjoying it so much and watched it so many times. And playing her son alongside her is David Dorfman, who apparently now is a lawyer. He graduated college super young and ended up going to law school. So that's an interesting story. He got out of acting young, but he plays Aiden. And frankly, he is not the greatest when it comes to his acting, and especially in this first film. I think he's notably better in the second, but he's not asked to do a whole lot either. And so, what he's given here, I think he does well. He's very much playing a stifled character in terms of his emotions. And so I think that works well. And maybe it comes off as him just not being the best actor, when in reality, it's just how the character was written. But it's hard to tell. I don't think I've seen him in anything outside of the Ring franchise. And like I said, I do think that he is much better in the second film. Ever since the first time I watched this movie, I just found it to be an effective horror film. And, just as true now, 22 years later, this is such a well-done movie. Gore Verbinski does a great job of kind of setting up the terror in this, and then it delivers. Now, mind you, 22 years later, it might not be quite as effective as it was the first few times I watched it, but that shouldn't take anything away from the film. It is still incredibly enjoyable and really well done in virtually every regard. I only realized recently that this score of this film is done by Hans Zimmer, and it is excellent. I've always loved the score, but I had no idea who did it. And so the fact that it was Hans Zimmer just makes sense because, of course, he is legendary at what he does. But this is such a well-done film in terms of the music and the score. Unfortunately, he doesn't return for the sequels, but you do get some of those hints of his score in the sequels, of course, mostly in the musical cues of Samara or the tape or whatever it might be. But his legacy lives on through the sequels, even though he didn't actually complete the scores for them. So I just love the fact that Hans Zimmer scored this one, and maybe you didn't realize that either, but I just thought that was really cool. Verbinski does an excellent job with the visuals of this film. Of course, the whole thing is very visual. We are talking about people watching a tape and then going on to die by a woman or a girl coming out of the TV screen, right? It is very much all in the visual realm. And I think because of that, he's able to do a little bit more with it than we would typically see out of mainstream horror films at this time. It almost feels a little bit more experimental, especially with the actual cursed video itself. And because of that, it felt very unique at the time, and frankly, it still does. Everything they're doing here just holds up really well 22 years after the fact. And so that's really just a nod to how good of a job Verbinski was able to do back in 2002. I actually am one of those that read the source book that this entire franchise is based off of, and for my money, this is an instance where the film does it better. I didn't love the book. I thought it was a little bit slower than I really wanted it to be. The storyline is still there, the basic premise for this, and I did like how some of the characters were built up in the book, but for my money, it's the movie all the way. Specifically, this remake, I think, does it best. But this is just a great horror movie. I loved it 22 years ago, and I love it today. I am going to give The Ring from 2022 4 out of 5 stars. And then jumping forward about 6 months in the timeline of the Ring franchise, in 3 years real time, we have 2005's The Ring 2. What's super fascinating about this film is the fact that it was directed by the director of the original Ringu and Ring 2, also did Dark Water amongst other things, but Hideo Nakata. So the fact that they were able to get that director in for this, I think is super interesting. Unfortunately, I still think that this one pales in comparison to the original film. So here we are, like I said, about 6 months later, Rachel and Aiden have moved out of the city and into the suburbs where she takes a small-time newspaper job. And of course, the videotape is going to find its way back to their local hometown. And she throws herself into it again to try to stop Samara and stop the tape from haunting more kids. So the beginning of this film, we do get the videotape. It opens up with Emily Van Camp as one of the main characters. Ryan Merriman, I believe is his name, playing the other one. Well-known people from the time, and I know them from various things since. Ryan Merriman was in Pretty Little Liars. With those two is where you get the tape, and we have the whole kind of expected opening sequence. But then, very shortly, the tape gets burned, and it never really comes back into play. And instead, The Ring 2 becomes a possession film, with Samara trying to take over Aiden. Samara, I keep messing up her name. Samara? I always do that. I feel like such an idiot, but you know who I'm talking about. Our main character here. So this is such a weird movie to me because it feels like it shouldn't nearly work as well as it does, even though it doesn't even work all that great. But for example, there's a sequence in this where it's kind of the infamous sequence of the CGI deer. And it should be utterly ridiculous, and a lot of people find it ridiculous. But for me, there's something about it that still works because I found it creepy. And yes, the deer is very obviously CGI, and that just looks silly. But I still was tense throughout that scene. And so I think that's a nod to Nakata's work there in order to build tension. I think he does a really nice job. There are other moments where I think that does come into play as well. There's a bathroom sequence where you get water kind of raising up. And it's just a really well done, well shot effect. And I thought that's another scene that was very tense, and I enjoyed that. There are some scenes like that I think are quite effective. But overall, the whole story of it being a possession story, I'm less interested in that than I was with what they did with the original film. Now, I know you have to kind of go further with the sequel, but I don't really know that they did that. They just went a different route. In the commentary track, they compare it to something like Alien and Aliens, not on that level of greatness, mind you, but just how Alien is more of a haunted house film where the sequel is more of an action horror film. And so they're kind of, from the same franchise, but almost two different genres. And that's similar here, two different subgenres of the same horror genre. But yeah, this is a decent movie, and it really just kind of cements the fact, at least in the first two, you do not want to be the male character in this one. Not Aiden, but like the adult male character. But yeah, it's interesting film. I like the cinematography on this one quite a lot. It is a lot brighter of a film than the first one. The first movie is color graded to no end, which I'll talk about in the transfer itself. But this one, it's a lot brighter. You're outside a lot more. It's the daytime a lot more. And so frankly, I just liked how it looked a lot better. It's not quite the color grade extravaganza that is the first film. So it feels different on a lot of levels. Not a terrible movie. I probably liked it more this time through than I have in the past. And I'll make mention, I watched the theatrical cut. The unrated cut does change up some scenes. Not only adds in a little bit, but it changes some sequences as well. So, whichever cut you preferred, go for it. But again, the unrated is only available on the Blu-ray, not the 4K disc. So, yeah, an odd movie, but I think it works better than most people give it credit for. So I am going to give The Ring 2 2.5 out of 5 stars. It feels very middle of the road to me. Jumping ahead now 12 years, we get to 2017's Rings, directed by F. Javier Gutierrez. So this is one that I frankly have not heard all that much about, and so I didn't really have high expectations coming into it. It almost feels like a forgotten film from this era. I don't know why. It's not one of those reboots, because it really is more of a sequel. But at the same time, it just feels so different than what we've got prior to it. So we are following this college professor who, I loved this, was played by Johnny Galecki from, of course, Roseanne and The Big Bang Theory, and I love him. And the fact that he was playing a professor in this, I just thought was awesome. I love The Big Bang Theory, and I think he's great in this. But he is a rogue professor who stumbles across a old VCR that has a tape inside, and of course, it's going to be our haunted tape, and decides that he wants to do some experiments. So he brings in this whole, group of college kids that he's teaching to go through this with him. And of course, they think they have a trail set up that one person watches it and then they have someone behind them that can watch it, to take over the 7 days and so on and so forth. And we follow our two main characters is a guy who's going off to college for the first time, Holt, and his girlfriend who stays home to take care of her mother. Well, all of a sudden she can't get a hold of him, and she receives a weird phone call from another girl that really spooks her. And is he cheating on her? What's going on? So she decides that she is going off to the college to figure out what's going on. And then she very quickly and frankly very easily stumbles onto this whole rings experiment thing that is going on. And then, of course, it's going to pick up from there. One thing that really annoyed me about this, now, mind you, I understand we're in 2017 at this point. VCRs and, old school CRT TVs were not very popular at that time. I totally get that. But I found it a little bit lame that in order for someone to copy the video for somebody else to watch it, they literally right-click on the file on their computer and hit copy, and that was it. Like, I wish they would have gone back to that VHS aesthetic, just kind of those steps a little bit to make it feel more meaningful when they're making this copy like they'd have to do in the original film. But unfortunately, this is in the digital age and that's just how this is done. And so that part was a little lame to me, but I think they do some interesting things with this in terms of how they're going to set up the fact that they're, in the video that our main character watches, there is a video within a video that's just meant for her. And that's going to take her on this whole other journey to try to find Samara's real birth mother and so on. So that part's interesting, but I don't know that they really go for it hard enough that makes it feel like its own film or to make it feel like a real true sequel to the Ring franchise. I think my biggest problem with this one, though, is just how soulless the whole thing felt. It didn't have much heart to it at all. It felt like people going through the motions. The direction was just cold. And I don't know, there was something about that really turned me off. I love generic horror films, generally speaking, but this one was just a little bit too generic for me. And the fact that it's part of the Ring franchise, it really should be the complete opposite. One of my, a favorite of mine in the horror genre. But this one just doesn't live up to what I want a Ring sequel to be. Even less so than Ring 2, which is really more of a possession film, like I said. This one, fortunately, we are dealing with the tape, but the whole concept of 7 days is just, it's out the window. You get it for about the first, 20 minutes or so. But then after one of the deaths happen and it kind of sets up our main story, that just goes out the window completely. I have no idea what day we're on at any point in this film, unlike the original where it lists day by day. Even in the sequel, there's actually a short film that bridges the original film with the sequel. And in that short film, there is the, day counting down going on. And that's just completely lost on this, which is a real shame. And let me just clarify, because I know someone will probably correct me. There is timing going on. But again, it's only in about the first 20-25 minutes. And then it just completely disappears. Where it should matter most is to our main character. And the concept of that is just completely missing here. Part of the ending of this one, which again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but part of the ending of this one also plays into that generic feeling with the way things kind of wrap up part of the story. And I thought that was just so kind of lazy and boring, even though I think the actor playing that role did a really good job. I just feel like the whole idea was so obvious and just silly. Like, of course, this is where this thing is going to end up, because where else could it possibly go? That's the type of feeling I had while I was watching through this one. Now, that said, the very end of this is a little bit harkening back to our original film, and I did like that. Frankly, that probably added a whole half a star for this film for me, because it felt like they finally caught on to what this franchise is and what's going on with Samara, oh my gosh, I'm terrible with that. What's going on with our main evil in this film. And so because of that, I appreciated the ending to this quite a lot, but that quick 5-minute thing, not even 5-minute thing, can't really save the rest of the film. And so this isn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it is below average. It felt very lifeless throughout the entire movie, and though I love Johnny Galecki, unfortunately even he couldn't save this one. So this felt like a movie that I just have no desire to really go back to down the road, to be honest with you. So I am going to give Rings from 2017 2 out of 5 stars. Let's talk now about the discs themselves and see, are these upgrades that are worth owning? And for my money, this is a tale of 3 cities because each of them are really doing their own thing. So I'm going to actually start by talking about the most recent film because this is the least interesting of the bunch. This was a 2017 film. Of course, it was shot digitally. So when I was watching this, I didn't see any film grain at all, which makes sense. If there was film grain, it would have been added after the fact. And so there's no natural film grain in this, and it's not needed in order to keep the detail because of the fact that it was shot digitally. That said, the upgrade from the Blu-ray over to the 4K, it is not very noticeable at all in my book. Now, this does have a new 4K master, but still, I didn't find the upgrade all that noteworthy. Frankly, if I'm going to be honest, I think I like the picture on this Blu-ray because I went back and compared them after the fact. I think I like the picture on the Blu-ray a little bit better because it's a bit brighter. And I know that's going to be sacrilege to some, but there were sequences in this film where I was just thinking to myself, why is this so dark? Now, could it be an instance where it's my TV, it's my settings? Sure, but I don't have that issue with other releases. And so for me, that stood out a little bit. I didn't really lose anything. I just thought to myself, this feels darker than it really needs to be. And on the Blu-ray, the old Blu-ray, it is lightened up quite a noticeable amount. So that's just going to be whichever your eye prefers. But to me, the transfer on this was fine, but it should be fine. It was shot digitally. So there's nothing really to write home about on Rings itself, other than, yes, it did get a new 4K master, but the difference is negligible in my book. From there, though, let's go over to the original film, because this one falls right in the middle for me in terms of ranking these picture upgrades. So the whole reason for the delay from October of 2023 to March of 2024 was to get the Gore Verbinski supervised new 4K transfer. And that's exactly what they were able to do here. So with that said, we are going more back towards what this looked like in theaters as opposed to its home media releases. On the home media releases, it does tend to go more blue, whereas now, and in the theater, it was more greenish elements. Now, that's what I've read. To my eyes, it still looks super stylized. It looks both green and blue throughout the entire film. The fact that this has Dolby Vision color grading, it doesn't really add that much to the film, simply because of the fact that there are not a lot of moments of like a bright light. It's going to be, everything is really covered in these blues and green overcast that goes on, which is intentional, totally intentional. It's an artistic choice by Verbinski, so it is what it is. I've always liked the look of this film. But if we're talking transfer quality, it doesn't look that much notably different to me. That said, the detail on this does look a lot better from the Blu-ray I've watched in the past, and so I think this absolutely is a worthwhile upgrade. But you're not going to get a lot of popping with the color grading like you might in some other films and like you might with the next one I'm going to talk about, just because of the way this is stylized. So really, there's only so much you can do when the director has decided to go with a specific style like this. So again, to my eyes, it looked better, but mostly in the detail. The color grading didn't really add a whole lot to the disc, in the fact that we are kind of shifting away maybe a little bit from those blues and more towards the greens. It's notable, but it's not going to really make that much of a difference to the film. That said, if you're someone who remembers what you watched back in the theater, because God knows I don't, if you remember that though, this is going to be a lot closer to that representation than what we've got on previous home media releases. So I think it's a great transfer. It looks really nice. But again, it's color graded so hard that it's hard to notice a lot of the differences there, at least to my untrained eye. And then finally, let's move over to what I think is the most notable upgrade here. And this also has a new 4K scan of the original camera negative. And again, it is in Dolby Vision. This is a much brighter film, as I talked about before. The whole color grading that's done by the director is just not there on this one. And I think that makes this transfer stand out a lot more. What also helps with that is that I've only ever seen this film on DVD because it didn't have a Blu-ray release here in the States. And so this is a notable, worthwhile, damn good upgrade of our DVD version of this. I think this looks excellent. There is a really nice layer of film grain in this, just like with the original, and the detail that it adds is very notable. I didn't find any of the dark sequences to be too dark in this, which again, you're just going to get probably a little bit more detail with how this one was filmed. And so I like this a lot. I think the special effects on this still hold up really well, even with this new transfer. Again, that bathroom sequence with the water rising, that is an excellent looking sequence. And I think it looks really good here. There are some moments where you get like in the wall, there's a tree that's burned into the wall. That looks really cool. In my opinion, this really is the transfer that you're buying this release for because it looks awesome. And we only got this on DVD previously. So if you enjoy this film at all, then I think this is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. So I would rank them as The Ring 2 and then The Ring, and then the other one is Rings that I just didn't think was that noticeable of a difference, other than it definitely made it a little bit darker, and you do get, of course, a bit more detail. But really, the Rings upgrade is not even notable. It's these two where it comes into play. And so I think they did a really nice job with what they had to work with, which is a super stylized film. I had already shot on digital film from 2017, and then one that severely needed a good upgrade, and they did a really nice job with that. I can more generically talk about the audio options on this one because for the most part, you're not really getting an upgrade here. Where that's not true is on the sequel, Ring 2, but the first two films come with an English DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 track and a 2.0 track, which that is the exact same that was on the Ring Blu-ray, but that is an upgrade from the DVD, which had an English Dolby Digital 5.1 and a 2.0 track. So you'll notice an upgrade there if you're an audiophile, which I, of course, am not. And then on Rings, you get the exact same tracks as the Blu-ray. You have a 7.1 DTS Master Audio track and a 2.0 track. So again, I had no issues with the audio on this whatsoever. I liked the first two films' audio tracks a little bit better. I thought they were just, I don't know, they were livelier, I think, than even the 7.1 audio track on Rings, but that's really just more the films themselves. So I had no issues. I thought everything was mixed well. I never lost any dialogue, and the effects worked well. So no issues for me on the audio side of this release. As far as special features go, you are getting almost everything that was in the previous releases. According to my research, there were about 3 short films, like we're talking 2 minutes or less on each of them, that are not included in this box set. But otherwise, you're getting everything that was on the previous releases, which is always good to see those things ported over. The big new things here are with The Ring 2, we get an audio commentary track on the theatrical version from 2 different podcasters, Emily Higgins and another individual whose name I'm forgetting right now, but they do a pretty decent job. I will admit, so you guys know I'm not a big audio commentary track guy, but I was really wanting to listen to this one to see if I could appreciate the film a little bit more because they very much like the movie. And admittedly, there were a lot of moments of silence in the audio track that I just wasn't expecting. I wish it would have had a true film historian on there or somebody with just a little more cachet, I guess, than a couple of podcasters. Not to denigrate podcasters at all. They, are very capable of doing an excellent job. I'm sure they're excellent. I'm sure they're both very knowledgeable and a lot smarter about film than I am, but I wanted a little bit more than what we got with that commentary track. The big thing here, though, is you get Ghost Girl Gone Viral, which is a feature-length documentary about this film series that is, just must-watch for fans of this franchise. It talks about the original Japanese series into the Americanization of it. So that is one that is, by all accounts, very recommended. Not one that I had time to watch before doing this review, but I've heard nothing but incredible things about the work that's done on that. And like I said, that's feature length. That's an hour and a half long. long. I definitely want to watch it, but I wanted to get this review out in some type of timely manner, so I just wasn't able to get to it yet. But yeah, that's available, which is really cool. One I will absolutely be going back to here in the coming days. So really good feature, a special feature set on this one. The two main things though that are new is the audio commentary track for The Ring 2, along with the Ghost Girl Gone Viral feature-length documentary. So you're really getting 4 films in here, which is just a really good bargain. So really nice job on the special features from Scream Factory. This box set from Scream Factory was a long time coming for me. I pre-ordered this way back in September of 2023, and now, months later, it's finally in my hands for me to enjoy, and honestly, I did enjoy it. I had a great time watching through these, even Rings, which I didn't really love. I was appreciative of the fact that that's included here, and that I got to see that one in the best format possible. Now, that said, if you are not someone who likes Rings or Ring 2, this is not a box set that's going to be worth your money. I imagine at some point we will get The Ring on 4K as a standalone release because it is such a popular and well-known horror film. But if you do enjoy any of these sequels, even if it's just the first sequel, Ring 2, then I think this is absolutely a worthwhile upgrade. Scream Factory has done the best that they could possibly do with the materials at hand in terms of what the director was looking for, their vision. And so I think the transfers on this look great, and the audio sounds awesome, no issues there, and it is packed with special features, including a feature-length documentary. So if you are a fan of this franchise, I think the asking price is well worth the money. If you are just a fan of the original, probably don't want to waste your time, but you probably didn't need me to tell you that. So I am going to give the Ring collection from Scream Factory 4 out of 5 stars. I think this one is a really solid addition to my physical media collection. All right, so those were my thoughts on the Ring collection, one that I'm happy to have in my physical collection, but I know it's not going to be for everybody. Such a mixed bag of films. Really, the first one is the greatest, and then it kind of goes downhill from there. But really, the only thing I'm questioning now is, do I hold on to my steelbook release, or do I sell it and get some of my money back from this 4K box set? Frankly, that's probably what I'll do, but for now, it's going to remain in my collection. But I want to hear from you guys down below. Is this a box set that you're considering picking up, or did you already grab it? Have you watched it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know what you think about this and anything else down in the comments below. And I'd love to hear specifically your thoughts about The Ring 2 and Rings as films. Do you guys like those movies, or are you with most people where you don't enjoy those at all? Let me know what you think about that down in the comments. But that is going to do it for today, guys. Before you go, if you could just hit that like button down below, that engagement really does help me out and helps my video get seen by more people. So thank you so much for helping me with that. But before you guys take off, I want to encourage you all to consume some media today. Thank you so much for checking this video out, and I will catch you all next time.